AI coding assistants are totally changing the way that developers write code. It's changing the whole workflow. I know that I use Cursor all the time, and it has totally changed my workflow. I get types generated for me, functions, comments, my variables get updated when I rename them all over my different files. It's fantastic. But one thing's for sure, when an organization and not an individual looks to adopt a tool, it's really hard to build a business case. It's hard to be sure what the impact of a major change in the developer workflow is actually going to do. Are people going to like it on aggregate? Is it going to make them more efficient? Possibly. Is it going to improve the quality of their code? Not so sure. All of these models are trained on a corpus of all of the internet's code, and that code has a lot of vulnerabilities and issues. And it's very hard to actually measure what the impact of faster releases potentially and more code being generated by machines is potentially more chaos to be managed. So it's really important when adopting these tools to try to do it in a data-driven way to the greatest extent that you can. And so today we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive on some new functionality that we've added that allows you to analyze your own GitHub Copilot adoption to try to understand how it might be impacting some of the metrics that matter to your organization. So we'll be taking a look at the SVP of engineering persona and doing a bit of a deep dive on some of the data that they already look at and how we're going to correlate it with data that we're pulling from GitHub Copilot. So the VP of engineering will already be looking at things like the DORA metrics, looking at the deployment frequency over time. Look at this cliff. Wow. The mean time to recovery, so how long it takes to recover from an incident. Lead time for changes, and also your change failure rate, so how often changes lead to issues. And these are all really important to track. They're tracking team performance as well across DORA benchmarks in a scorecard. And they want to know generally how the factory is working. It's not going to show them developer sentiment, but it'll give them an idea about the quality and the regularity and how the factory is actually running, the production line. They'll get a more deep view on different non-functional needs when they look at their scorecard overview. So this is where they can see for different non-functional areas what the performance is like across different services. So PR metrics, for example, code quality, but then also across teams. So understanding code quality across different teams, seeing teams that are doing it well, with some gold services inside those teams, which is great news. And this gives the VP of engineering or engineering leadership more generally the ability to potentially make some decisions, like let's embed someone from the firewall team in the visual storytellers team and give them some information on code quality, train them up on how to use our tools, maybe go and do some enablement with Sonar Cubes so that we can get our developers getting more value from the tools they're already using. So already this is a really useful tool for them to understand how code is from a non-functional perspective. And then there's also survey responses, so understanding the sort of qualitative side of things, not just how the factory is running, but how happy are the workers. So, what's the average satisfaction of uninterrupted work? Super important. Sort of balancing on-call duties without the work time, all the different things that matter to engineering leadership to have a different lens of how things are going. And so when we start thinking about coding assistance, it's really important to consider what impact the introduction of a new tool is going to have on those metrics over time. So the way we do this is essentially by correlating a lot of the data that we're already collecting with the usage metrics that we're pulling from GitHub. So here you can see that we're plotting the total active users of GitHub against the mean time to recovery and the deployment frequency. And you can see here that the mean time to recovery is sort of coming down. It sort of comes back up again. So there are some questions to answer. The deployment frequency is coming up, which is good news. So based on these correlations, we can start to maybe extrapolate what's going on. So maybe we're having more incidents, so the mean time to recovery is coming up. Perhaps the deployment frequency has to do with deployments of fixes, not necessarily functional work. So there's more data that you want to correlate, but gives you an idea, at least at the top level. We can see as well some AI insights. So, we can see here the deployment frequency, that the total suggestion count, which is a metric that we get from GitHub, correlates with a 30% rise in deployment frequency. So we saw that in the graph, and we can understand how that could be the case. The more suggestions that are being accepted by developers, the more code that they're likely to ship, and the more regularly they can focus on merging PRs and deploy more frequently. So it all compiles. We can see a breakdown of code completions by different IDEs. So it could give you an idea of different experiences that developers are having in different IDEs. And, potentially WebStorm has a worse experience than VS Code when it comes to code completion. And then, you've got options like, potentially suggesting that the developers using WebStorm move to VS Code. That's a joke. Developers don't like that. Don't tell them to move IDEs. Really, don't do it. Code coverage over time. So seeing the code coverage against benchmarks and seeing it go up, and whether it's approaching the upper, P90 benchmark. Bug density over time, a sort of acceptance rate of different, suggestions from Copilot. Vulnerabilities over time coming down. Once again, could be correlated to this, could be correlated to other security initiatives. So, of course, correlation is not causation, but it puts a lot more data at the fingertips of engineering leadership than they're really used to having. And when it comes to making some sort of assessment about the time savings, we can look at the task cycle time and sort of extrapolate to see, an economic time savings. And this is really useful in making the business case if you're looking to expand, potentially bring on more licenses, roll out to more teams. This data is really key to building your business case. So that's a quick deep dive. We'd love to hear from you if you have particular tools that you work with that you'd like us to look at supporting, and just generally to hear about your experiences working with coding assistants. It's a very interesting time, and it's interesting to hear lots of anecdotes from our customers. So thank you very much, and be in touch. Thank you.